This car weekend, I will introduce you to a little fun project of mine, the Stealthgauge, a homemade boost gauge integrated into the dash that, unlike usual aftermarket boost gauges, would not ruin the OEM look, and is practically invisible when turned off, like it was never there in the first place. To start this project, I took a cheap digital eBay boost gauge and found out what voltages its sensor outputs at certain air pressures. To do that, I could apply air pressure to the sensor and measure the voltage, but I decided it's way simpler to just apply some voltages to the gauge instead and see what it displays. Turns out the sensor outputs 1 volt at atmospheric pressure and then it adds a volt for each bar of air pressure, or subtracts at negative pressure. So 0 volts at -1 bar, 2 volts at 1 bar, and so on. This is very convenient as it will make the math very easy. I simply need to subtract 1 from the voltage output in order to get the barometric readout. So now I need something to process this data and display it. For that I use an Arduino board, which is, in case you're unfamiliar, an open source microcontroller developer board. They come in all sorts of different shapes and capabilities and let you, with very little knowledge about microcontrollers, program them. And that's why they are being used for all sorts of projects. Garden watering systems, 3D printers, robotic arms. The imagination is the limit here. For my particular project I use an Arduino Nano, because of its small size and low cost. Building a prototype and writing the code took no more than an hour. I built it on a breadboard, also known as a solderless board, because it lets you connect components without soldering, which is very convenient for prototyping. As you can see, I designed my stealth gauge to display oil pressure as well. But as I was almost finished with this project, I made an embarrassingly stupid mistake which destroyed my oil pressure sensor, so I had to leave it out for now. I will tell more detail about that mistake as we get there. So now with the prototype working, the components get transferred to the dash, so remove the dashboard. The plan is to fit the little OLED display into the slot originally designed for the gear select display in models that came with an automatic transmission. To fill the gap I'll need a piece of transparent plastic. Now normally I would make a CAD drawing and get it laser cut out of plexiglass, but I wanted it done now, so instead I cut it out of this random plastic box. A layer of semi-transparent matte black foil will make it match the dash while letting through the light of the display. Another red foil on the display itself will turn the display's white color into red to match the red lightning of the dash. Now wires get soldered to the display and it can be mounted inside the dash with an, let's just say, improvised mounting system. Since there aren't that many components, I don't use a separate board to solder them on. Instead, I just solder everything onto the Arduino board. I take 12 volts to power this project from that little connector. Now let's sort out the wiring inside the car. For the boost pressure sensor I use a cable with 3 wires inside, one for power, one for ground and one for signal. The boost sensor gets soldered to it and everything heat shrinked. I mount the sensor behind the firewall to protect it from heat and humidity, and route a vacuum hose from a T-junction that I inserted into the factory vacuum hose, going from the manifold to the map sensor. Now you're probably wondering, why use a second pressure sensor? Why not just read the output voltage of the factory map sensor with the Arduino to calculate the boost pressure? And well, actually this would have been an even more elegant solution. The only reason I didn't do it that way is because I thought of it too late. I route the cable through this relay box. The factory oil switch gets removed and I screw in the aftermarket oil pressure sensor. I don't need to route a wire for this one, because there is already that white wire going directly from the dash to the oil switch. Now normally I wouldn't slice into a factory harness, but just look at the condition of it. It has been butt-shot already by previous owners, so there's nothing to save here. A purple wire that goes to the oil pressure sensor with a green heat shrink for maximum street cred, and a black wire gets soldered to the wire coming from the dash. Since I removed the factory oil switch, the dash would display an oil pressure error. Therefore the Arduino is also programmed to act as an oil switch for the dash. So it switches a relay according to the oil pressure readout, just like the oil switch would have switched itself. And now about that accident with the oil pressure sensor. Up until now I assumed that the sensor's ground terminal was connected directly to its metal case, which would have been convenient since the engine block is grounded, so no additional wiring would have been necessary. So since it was not, I hooked up a wire to the ground terminal and looked for a good grounding place to screw it to. Little did I know that the place I decided was the best was not a ground point at all, more like a wire directly connected to the positive terminal of the battery. There was a huge spark followed by a loud blat from me, and that was the end of the oil pressure sensor. Luckily it was just the oil pressure sensor that failed. So until the new pressure sensor arrives, I decided to finish the project without the oil pressure readout. Everything got reassembled and the Stealthgauge was ready, and I really like how it turned out. I have to say the camera does no justice here. It really looks like built in from the factory, and I really enjoy having it there. I hope you enjoyed this project as well, and have a nice car weekend.